drainage, critter path, age of the seeds, all those things are important. Materials you have on hand. Take a look around your yard and see if you can recycle some of those materials. I'll show you an example a little later on, as opposed to going out and buying everything. See what you can utilize first. And my goodness, definitely create a budget, because gardening can become really pricey if you just go out to one of the big box stores and buy a bunch of stuff without a budget. Okay. All right. So we're going to talk about backyard gardens, patio gardens, container gardens, and unique ways to garden. So as you can see here, a few things to consider. When she was building this garden, we had to consider drainage patterns. Initially, this garden was back against the fence, and we didn't realize that all her rainwater drains from the back of that fence. So when you don't consider your drainage patterns initially, you can end up having to move your garden. It's no fun when you have things like cedar blocks that you have to move again. The location, you want to consider the size of the garden. Is this too much garden for me? Is it not enough garden for my family? I mean, that's things you want to consider. All right. Open area backyard. Now, if you have just this big open area, the sky's the limit. I will point out that this garden looks huge, but it's really not huge, okay? It's just a backyard garden, uh, and each side of those is squat 500 square feet on each side. So it's not a acreage, it's just a decent sized backyard garden. All right, so when you're working with small gardens and have limited space, you want to think of, okay, big or small tomatoes. Most gardeners love tomatoes, but when you have a small space, do you want to grow a beefsteak tomato, or would you prefer to grow a cherry tomato? My vote would be a cherry tomato, and this is the reason why. If you can see the big tree behind the greenhouse, that tree attracts a lot of squirrels, a lot of birds. I've grown beefsteak. If you get one peck or a couple pecks from your lovely tomato, then guess what? They can ruin that tomato. But if you have cherry tomatoes, a couple squirrels can take a couple cherry tomatoes out, birds, and you still have plenty for your shelf. But just remember, guys, that it's going to grow up and look like this. So this is, believe it or not, a determinate type of cherry tomato, which means determinate and indeterminate. Determinate means I know how large that plant is going to get. Indeterminate means I have no idea how large that cherry tomato plant is going to become, or that tomato plant. So that's something else to consider. All right. So patio gardens slash apartment gardens. So as you can see here on the picture on the right hand side, she grew these in what's called earth boxes. And these are kind of cool when you have a patio and sunshine comes in a certain way or a certain angle. These things are actually on wheels, so you can roll them around. Uh, we have the string on each side, where if you're growing something that needs support, such as tomatoes, you can kind of interweave them within the strings. Or if you're growing something like cucumbers, it's a great support. Okay. When when having a patio garden, you want to consider sunlight, water, air, proper drainage, and nutrients. So she has a little bit of in-ground gardening right next to the patio. So as those earth boxes are draining, there's a tube, and the water kind of drains out on the side, and it actually drains into the in-ground garden. And behind there are two dwarf citrus trees. So she has herbs in the back, she has her vegetables in the earth boxes, and then two dwarf varieties of citrus trees. All right, so here's a better look. And as you can see, that's not a very large space. From the earth box to the front door, I would dare to say it's probably not even 10 feet. Um, a picture over to the right hand side near the door, that's another box that you would consider if you have small spaces. And it's a raised bed with a plastic container. She has it covered because she was growing squash at the time, and we were trying to hide it from the squash vine board. Okay, so this is a picture without the cover on there. And you can just see how much stuff you can actually grow in a small space. And again, we're talking a patio garden here. All right. So in this picture, this is another very small garden. Um, I like this garden because she actually created the design to kind of mimic the corner of the fence. As you can see, there's a big tree behind there. That tree again has lots of squirrels. And the squirrels, one thing you know about squirrels is they're kind of prey animals. They don't like to be on the ground a lot. So for that garden, she moved it away from the fence. So the squirrel would actually have to go down the fence, grow through the gravel, and then climb up on the top of the garden, which doesn't happen. You know, she says she's yet to see it happen. And then for this particular design, it allows you to kind of sit and rest. There's not a lot of bending involved. So, and then there's still kind of a little open area if you want to put a little picnic table or something of that nature on there. All right. So up next, container gardens. So there are many pros and cons about container gardens. So a few of the pros are it's excellent for limited space. There are many designs. You can use clay pots, plastic pots, fabric now. The cons are, in the heat of Houston, Texas, oh my goodness, those things dry out in the summer. So I found myself watering them at least once a day. I mean, depending on how small the container is and what you're growing, you might actually have to grow it, water it a couple times a day. So, and I'm sure a lot of you gardeners online have seen where you start off with this container full of soil, and you're not even halfway through the season, and the soil is half full in the container because containers can require a lot more nutrients. Okay. All right. So I wanted to show you just an example of what I'm growing in my container, which is a squash plant. So I started off, as you can see in the picture on the left, just the little plant. And it's only been, I want to say it's been about 30 days, and the plant is already really big. And so it has three squash already on there. It's just my husband and I, so we don't require, massive amounts of squash, but it gets the job done. And that container, that is a clay pot with ceramic coating, and on the bottom it's exposed clay, so it's not ceramic covered on the bottom. All right. So more ways, fruit trees and herbs in containers. As you can see on the picture to the right-hand side, those are all fruit trees. He has some sweet potatoes in the front When I stepped in that backyard, I was blown away. I'm like, wow, all these fruit trees in containers. And might I add, a lot of them were producing fruit. So, uh, you know, it's not a very decorative backyard, but fruit trees is what that grower wanted. He had limited space, he had containers, and also this is a good option if you're a renter and you want your fruit tree and you want to move your fruit tree, then that's a possibility as well. The picture here on the left hand side, you can see a few herbs growing in containers as well. I like containers. You can see the lemongrass. For the ones who haven't grown lemongrass before, it can get really big and bushy. So this is a nice way to kind of maintain the size of your lemongrass. And again, if you're a renter or you just want to move it, it's a great option. All right, so my favorite way to grow when you have a small space, I like to grow in ground, on ground, and definitely above ground. So I'll put this disclaimer out here. It does require a lot of nutrients. So I use a lot of compost and other nutrients, whatever works for you. I say there's no wrong way to garden. There's just different ways to work for you, ways that work better than others. But as you can see, this big cabbage plant here, in ground, those are carrots that are surrounding the cabbage plant. Over to the left-hand side, it's an herb. It's called salad burnet. And over to the right-hand side, you can kind of see it, but it's a tomato plant and it's cherry tomatoes, and of course that'll eventually grow up tall. On the left-hand side, really hiding in the corner, that is spinach. So, and it's vine spinach, New Zealand's best. So it'll grow that vine, and you pretty much have yourself a good salad there. Without the cucumbers, the salad burnet gives it that nice, wonderful cucumber flavor. Okay, so, all right. So another unique way to garden is with this method. It's an African keyhole garden. So if you just have one space and you want to have a compost in the center or a composter, this is a great way. It's a round in shape, and in the center there, what you do is you continually add your compost, and it of course brings earthworms. It provides nutrients to your soil that's surrounding it. So every time you add compost, you want to add a little bit of soil to cover that compost so it doesn't bring critters. And I've seen that work wonders here in Houston. But that's the African keyhole garden. And if you Google that, there's many different things you can grow in there as well. All right. So raised bed, in ground, stone, wood, plastic, different materials. Okay, so when I started this year off with COVID, everybody's kind of working on a budget a little bit, or at least we're trying to hold on to our pennies that we have. I happen to have a bunch of bricks in my backyard, so I wanted to grow sweet potatoes. The bricks in my backyard are probably 58 cents, or about maybe a dollar, maybe a dollar. I haven't looked for bricks for a while, but they're very economical. So for that, I just kind of created a little round design, and I used weed block to fill that round space. I emptied the soil into the weed block so the soil wouldn't, when I watered it, the soil wouldn't go through the little gaps in the actual bricks. And I'm thinking that'll work just perfect for my sweet potatoes this year. And it's a design that'll allow me to completely break it down I didn't have a square space where I could actually, put this structure that wouldn't move. So the bricks work just fine. On the left-hand side, that's a great raised bed. It is wood. The difference is, of course, over time, when you buy something like that, it is going to eventually deteriorate. And uh, it's kind of pricey. So on Amazon, it was around $150. So you say, okay, you'll have to have this, at least this amount of space for this structure. Or you can look over to the bricks on the other side, which may cost you about 20 bucks as opposed to 150. All right. So let's talk about this garden. This is a wonderful, unique way to garden. Now, they are not growing produce right here, but this is a cross from Recipes for Success, uh, who kind of run Hope Farms as well. And the thing I love about this is the community taking care of this garden. It's in the median of the street. So opposed to just kind of having trees, they had a butterfly garden and all sorts of different ornamental flowers and shrubs and plants. And it was just absolutely beautiful. So it's a unique way to garden in a small space. Okay, so a few things you might want to remember. Create that sketch. You want to write a list of the vegetables you plan to grow. Um, I know that sounds a little silly, but year after year, when I started gardening, I would grow beets. And the only person in my house who liked beets was me. And I would grow a lot of beets. So you want to plant varieties that the whole family enjoys eating, or your friends or coworkers, you might want to share some of the produce with them. Um, so if you're using chemicals, I always say begin with the most environmentally friendly products first. And gardening, if you're new to gardening this year, don't give up. It usually takes a season, especially if you're growing in ground, for your soil to kind of acclimate and get all those microorganisms happy and doing what they're supposed to be doing. Okay, so earlier I had mentioned the age of the seeds. You can clearly see something growing on the left-hand side in the green container. And on the right-hand side, you can clearly see something is not growing. Well, guess what, guys? That's the exact, those are microgreens. The only difference was I had a really old pack of seeds.
Kim, you went silent, so you might want to repeat. You haven't come back yet. Are you there, Kim? All right. I think we're just having a little bit of issue with audio right now. If you just hold on one moment, we're hoping that Kim will come back on.
Okay, can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Yes.
Okay. Let's get back to where we were. Okay, let's see.
And I just want to remind everyone to keep their microphones muted.
Okay, sorry about that, guys. So, age of the seeds. So clearly, on the right-hand side, you can see the green container, nothing is growing. On the left-hand side, you can clearly see something is growing. Okay, those are microgreens. The only difference was the age of the seeds. They had the exact same soil, lighting, water. The age of the seeds were the difference. So on the left hand side, those seeds, they're 2018, believe it or not. On the right hand side, I want to say those were seeds were about 5 years old. Okay, so you just want to kind of make note of the age of the seeds. Um, Matter of fact, I want to mention one other thing about the age of the seeds. When you have limited space and a designated time when you're planting, this is really important. Time is of the essence when you plant that stuff. And the one thing you don't want to do is get all ready and excited and get the right soil and wait 1 day, 2 day, 3 day, 7 days, and nothing comes up. So just want to mention that. All right, so something else that's important for us urban gardeners is watering. Water the soil, not the leaves. Water in the morning and not the evening. And if you're gonna spray the foliage with a little bit of water, it is important to do that in the morning so that has a chance to evaporate off of those leaves. Especially now in the season, you'll see powdery mildew on squash and things of that nature. So some of that can be avoided with just watering correctly. All right, so last but not least, be patient and relax. Gardening sometimes can take some time, and you might not always get everything that you want, but often you will get a bumper crop of one thing or another. So just a reminder to be patient and relax. All right. So if you have any questions, you can contact me at kimberly.perry@ag.tamu.edu. I would ask that you guys find me on Facebook, Kim Perry, and friend me. I'm going to share I love to can and things of that nature. So I'm going to share a canning recipe a little later on this afternoon that I make each year, and it turns out wonderfully. So with that, I think I'm right at my 30 minutes. I apologize if I was going a little fast. I was trying to hit that 30-minute mark. So are there any questions for me, Brandy?
Yeah, Kim, there were quite a few on the germinating. I know that that's probably a whole nother topic, but I'll ask a few of them. So with the germination, do you want to leave them in regular sunlight or a dark space?
Okay, it really depends on what you're trying to grow. So one thing I will say for sure, when you have the smaller the seed, the tougher they are to germinate. The bigger the seed, of course, the easier they are to germinate. You have things like radish. Radish pretty much doesn't care. You just need to have the moisture levels for that. Um, I would typically say if you're growing, I'll refer to this season. I grow my best tomatoes in the fall, believe it or not. There's less critters for me in the fall. But when I start those plants off, I might start them in a dark area, those seeds for tomatoes, and then I'll bring them into the sunlight. And they need a lot of sunlight because if not, your plants get tall and leggy, which means they're basically reaching towards the sun. All right.
Okay, the next one is well, should the seeds be chilled in the fridge, and how much time should you wait to see if the seeds are growing? So how long does it take for them to pop up?
Okay, so again, that depends on the variety that you're growing. Some seeds, pepper plants, when the master gardeners start their cells, I know the pepper plants, were typically grown months in advance, as opposed to some of the other plants. They pop right up. Radishes pop right up. I mean, I don't chill any of my seeds. I know some people do. They're trying to get it to replicate that dormancy and then break in dormancy. I've only seen that. I've only done that really with garlic, and that's because garlic darn near takes about a year to grow. But other than that, just follow the directions on whatever that seed packet says.
And when do you start your seeds for the fall tomatoes?
Okay, so you start your fall tomato seeds in the summer, and that way you have a nice healthy plant that you put out there. And when I say summer, I'm saying you probably start them in July, early July, and you want to start those indoors for sure. If I were going to try to grow, yeah, that's when you're going to start them.
It sounds like maybe growing seeds might be a whole nother topic that you can explore.
I think you could be right. And same with squash, guys. So if you're growing winter squash, you plant that winter squash in the summer. And the summer squash you plant in the spring.
There's a couple questions about watering, why it's best to water in the morning and not in the evening. I think every one of us might have an answer for that, but
Okay, so I would say I would start off by saying, you talk to a lot of gardeners, successful gardeners, and people all do things differently. I would say there are no wrong ways to garden. There are ways that work better than others. And I would dare to say, some people say you absolutely have to do it like that. Look, I've seen other people do it the opposite and it works for them too. For me, I like to water for sure in the morning. That gives those leaves a chance to evaporate if you spray the leaves. It gives the plant a chance, the soil to retain that moisture as the hot sun is beaming down on them. Or in the evenings, I would definitely say water the soil. And again, it gives those roots a chance to prepare for that hot sun that they'll be facing in the day.
yeah, I would agree with that, with watering whenever you can. Sometimes your schedule doesn't allow for, one over the other. Continuous watering at night, usually that could encourage, problems with fungus, but I end up being an evening waterer sometimes just because that's when I can do it.
Yeah.
So, let's see. What are the best hours of sunlight, and how many of those hours do vegetables need? This particular question is asking about watermelon, or at least she mentioned watermelon.
Okay. So that is a tough question. It depends on what your yard looks like. I mean, uh, which, you know, where your sun is facing your backyard. That'll tell you. Not being able to see it um, is difficult. If you kind of go out there and you look at your backyard. I know my backyard. Uh, Part of it is shaded for most of the day, and then the other part is gets a lot of sun. So it depends on each person's backyard. Watermelons typically require a good amount of sunlight, and contrary to popular belief, they don't need a whole lot of water. They just the normal amount of water, but they do require a lot of nutrients.
All right, and there's a lot of questions about which compare you are on Facebook. So if you send out an email following this, perhaps you can just add that link.
Sure.
That
And
might
I
be the straightest shot.
Sure. And I tried to add the link on my name. If you click on my name, it might take you there, but I'm not I'm not sure. I'm learning, guys. I'm not very tech savvy. That's Paul and Brandy.
Okay,
And oh, go
Kim,
ahead.
Kim and Brandy, let me see. Brittany Oberg has her hand raised, so let's try this. So I'm gonna take her, I'm gonna unmute her, I think, and if she's got, can I do this or not? Let me see. Brittany, click on your microphone to make it live and ask your question. I could hear something happen, but I did not hear that question. Okay, so Brandy, if you want to continue, go ahead.
I
Okay.
was just going to add the I just
Okay, hold on a second.
Here she
Brittany,
is.
is that you?
yeah.
Yes.
Go ahead, ask away.
Okay. I was wondering what you do about squash vine borers.
Okay, so squash vine borers are probably my number one enemy. So what I do, there's a couple different things you can do. So I don't know if you, let me see if I can click back at the picture. There's a couple things you can do. You can actually cover your squash plant when it's small. Let's see. Okay, so you can cover your squash plant when it's small. The the actual squash vine borer, it's flying around. It's a kind of an attractive insect, and it lays eggs right there on the stem of your squash vines. They are about the size of a grain of pepper. So if you have somebody with good younger eyes who can see those little eggs that they lay on the stem of the squash vine, you can pop those babies off and you'll be good for squash vine borer. Or if you cover it, you're hiding the plant from them actually laying eggs on the stems. That's another way, but when it begins to flower, you're going to have to pull that cloth off so it can actually find, so the pollinators can find the flowers.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, I was just finishing up adding some links. So I'll just look through real quickly and see if there's a couple more questions.
Sure.
Oh, how can you save money on soil for potting plants? I'll let you answer this, but if anything, you might want to spend the most on the soil.
Yes. So soil's the most important thing. I just use another way to actually get soil, quality soils. You can create your soil. Again, gardening can take a little bit of time. So to create your soil, I save leaves and I add those leaves to my compost pile, and it actually decomposes and helps with the soil that's already there. As a supplement. Soil is going to be expensive, but for my gardens, I pretty much only use uh, two things. I use compost and I use microlife. That's it. Grows everything for me all season long.
All right, I think that's about it. There was a question about how to get that canning recipe. And as a reminder, you said you were going to post it on your Facebook page. And since then, Danny posted your Facebook link on the chat in the chat box.
Oh, nice. Thank you, Danny.
Okay, Kim, I see two hands raised here. So first, I am going to go with, let me see, Tammy has her hand raised. So if you want to take your, make your microphone live and ask your question, that would be great. Tammy?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great. So my question is about the nutrients. How do you determine what type of nutrients different type of vegetables need?
Okay, so depending on what you're trying to do, uh, if it's an in-ground garden, people often say you can get your soil tested. For me, I use two different things. I either use liquid fish or I use liquid seaweed. Liquid seaweed helps with the leaf development, foliage. That's great if you're trying to grow spinach or lettuce. I use the liquid fish for the flowering. Your plants will let you know if it's deficient in something. Um, just kind of take a look at them and then you can possibly add whatever that supplement is. If it's in the pot, if it's bag soil, the bag soil stuff is pretty good. I mean, they have it down packed. There's some work better for people than others, if that kind of answers your question.
Yeah, yeah. So that would work the same with like a raised bed type thing too, using those two type things.
Yes. So I raised bed, I get the raised bed soil, a couple bags of that.
Mm-hmm.
Compost if you have it, or if you can purchase it, and a little bit of microlife.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank
Okay.
you.
You're welcome.
Okay, Kim, let's see. I've got another hand raised. Mohammed, if you want to turn your mic on and ask your question.
Okay, my quick question was stink bugs. I always, as soon as the weather gets a little damp, like right now, I do start seeing stink bugs on my tomatoes. And they start small and like freaking they're all over the place in probably 2 weeks. How do I fix that?
Oh, wow. Okay, stink bugs, my number two enemy. So the best way to catch stink bugs, if you can catch them when they're in little clusters, they're these kind of bright red insects with black legs. Um, I don't have an image here, but if you can catch them when they're small and kill them in the neat stage, then that helps when they're, before they develop into adults. Um, it'll take going out there and you have to really stare at your plant and see if you can find those clusters. Once they become adults, they're really difficult to get. You can catch them in the morning when they're a little bit sluggish, and a lot of people just try to bring a bucket out. And since their first instinct is to drop down, you can hit the plant, and they'll drop into that soapy bucket. But the best way to do it is to try to catch them before they're actually adults.
Thank you.
And Kim, I just I uploaded two different stink bug links. One of them's a little bit older, but it's an awfully colorful document. And then the other one is an Insects in the City link. I think that was from Mike Merchant. So I think that's about it. I don't see anything else. Paul?
I've got one more hand raised. I've got Cheryl, you've got your hand raised. So if you want to make your mic live and ask your question.
Yeah, so this is Rick, Cheryl's husband.
Okay.
Yeah. So we've planted sweet potatoes and peas, black-eyed peas, and everything I've been reading says really you don't feed them at all during the season. Is that right?
Yes, for sweet potatoes, they require pretty much next to no nutrients, as well as peas. I would give my peas a little bit of nutrients, but the sweet potatoes, they're kind of like okra. Okra's a tough plant. Sweet potatoes a tough plant. They can pretty much grow in anything. I mean, they can grow in our clay soil, but I always amend the soil so you can get a nice shaped tuber, the nice size of the tuber. If it's growing in clay, it's going to be misshaped and, not as attractive. It has a more difficult time to grow. But yes,
How often would you feed the peas?
so I would start off with the peas probably early in the season. So when I plant them, I would just kind of amend that soil and then let them go ahead and go and grow, and be
Okay.
sure to give those leaves as compost because they're nitrogen. They have a lot of nitrogen in the leaves.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, Brandy, do you have any other questions posted?
There was just one for the best fruit trees to grow in small spaces, but I don't know if that's something that Kim would like to. I don't know if you'd have an answer right off for that. Do you have any recommendations?
Brandy, is there a link to the tree varieties that the master gardeners have, and then you can take a look at some of those dwarf varieties?
Um,
Or maybe we can email them the link.
yeah, there's a recommended fruit and nut varieties. You'd have to run through and see what the, yeah, there's a couple things, but maybe I'll just send them to you and then you can send something out.
All right, that sounds great. I mean, just right off the bat, things grow. Citrus does very well here. Again, I would grow something like the smaller oranges, the clementines, things like that. I mean, if you're trying to grow the Valencias, you can get some of those, but it just takes longer. You want fruit a little quicker. Figs do wonderful here. Um, what's another variety? I mean, persimmons do well here. They can take a little bit of time. One of my favorites is peaches. Peaches do really well here, and you'll get fruit within a couple years. So before planting any of the fruit trees, I always like to grow. If I have the space, I'll plant a tree for each season. That way you'll have produce for each season of the year.
Okay. Well, Kim, thank you for your presentation. I think everyone is taking a little bit of information away and ready to get out there in the garden. Yes, this has been recorded. Kim, as soon as I get the download, Kim, I will forward it to her, and she will send you the link as to where she has it posted. So again, thank you all for joining us. And next week, Brandy will be presenting hers on attracting the good wildlife into your garden. So until then, have a great week. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Bye bye.